Jesus Christ! Huh. Not quite.
We've all enjoyed watching a show or a movie where there's that one character that's so irredeemably evil that they steal the scene. Once they're on screen, you can't look away. But why is that? Why do we enjoy hating some antagonists over others? Easy examples are Homelander from The Boys, Azula from The Last Airbender, or Skylar White from Breaking Bad. Wait, what? Why is she in here? Maybe it's something primitive in us. A part of the brain that loves hating someone without nuance. Complex approaches containing opposing truths are hard, but simple blanket judgments are easy. To some degree, I think these monkey-brained mob mentality behaviors could even be pointed out in real life, but...
Hey man, I'm not touching this.
Let's take a look at two character pairs that highlight this line between unforgivable and forgivable. Azula and Zuko are both royalty of the Fire Nation, and both commit their fair share of wrongful acts in attempts to capture Aang, while also negatively impacting the world around them in their efforts. Despite this, both of them are met with very different attitudes when it comes to the broader discourse, in universe and in the real world. One of the biggest examples of this rift between them is Uncle Iroh, the wise, enlightened father figure we all know and love. When Zuko asks Iroh to train him in order to better fight off Azula, he caveats this request saying that he knows Iroh likely believes Zuko should be trying to get along with her. However, Iroh surprises us here with his response.
No, she's crazy and she needs to go down.
While Iroh isn't expressing any outright vitriol towards Azula, we can clearly see that this Grandmaster of the White Lotus, who secretly supports the Avatar while aiming to guide Zuko towards redemption, considers Azula a lost cause. While Zuko and Azula are both morally corrupt in pursuing their goals, the key difference lies in how they respond to the failure, pain, and self-reflection that comes with the tribulations that drove them to their goals in the first place. Zuko, for all his anger and confusion, is constantly struggling with the morality of his actions. He questions his father's ideology, he seeks guidance from Iroh, and most importantly, he makes choices that reflect growth, even when they come at a personal cost. His redemption arc is messy and painful, sometimes taking a step or two back while taking that step forward, but that struggle is what makes it feel earned. Azula, on the other hand, doubles down. Every time she is confronted with an opportunity to reflect or grow, she isolates herself further. She manipulates her way into bringing Ty Lee onto the team, controls information on the Avatar's death to blackmail Zuko, and lashes out at anyone that stumbles between her and her all-consuming goals for even a moment. To top it all off, her world finally starts to crumble in Season 3 when Mai and Ty Lee betray her, and the fear tactics that once kept everyone in line stop working. She breaks. But instead of breaking open in a profound, paradigm-shifting way, she breaks closed. She spirals deeper into unhealthy coping, rejecting humility. That's the difference. Zuko does that. Azula doesn't. So while Zuko's story ends with hope, Azula's ends with a haunting sense of, why couldn't we get a damn Season 4? I search up those tweets and think about what could have been after every one of my yearly rewatches of this show. What is in this rift of redemption that Iroh sees between his niece and nephew? This isn't just about whether a character is bad or evil. It's about whether they have the capacity and, more importantly, the willingness to be better. And sure, while that sums things up to an extent, I think there's also something to be acknowledged in that while Zuko went through a lot being banished, his banishment and exile allowed him much more room for growth and recovery, especially when he has animated Uncle Phil behind him through the journey, as opposed to Azula. In a way, her power and valuable gifts were a curse that kept her stuck closer to the Fire Nation and, as a result, right under the thumb of the Father Lord.
You mean the Fire Lord?
That's what I just said.
One thing that makes this topic tough to explore with an animated kid-friendly show is that the story won't ever outright show us any graphic depictions of victimhood and suffering, and as such, it's considerably easier to talk about forgiveness and redemption with these characters because we, as the ever-judging viewer, never have to feel a disgust about these characters' actions that weighs equally with the guilt they might feel about it themselves. It's the same as if me and you spoke of war in our own intellectual or allegorical, detached way, as opposed to seeing the horrors and brutality that come with it in a more real way, even if that's only a jump from metaphor to literal video. So let's use The Boys as an example. Homelander and Butcher from The Boys mirror this rift between Azula and Zuko surprisingly well. Homelander and Azula are both considered mentally too far gone and narcissistic, whereas Butcher and Zuko are both at their core acting out of a desire to protect people they love, preserve precious relationships, and at times may fall too deep into aggression and distrust, trying to protect what they hold dear. While The Boys isn't a completed story the way that The Last Airbender is, we know that to an extent Butcher does have a willingness to self-reflect and do better, even though his current arc leaves him in the 2 steps backstage of what might be a journey to redemption. At the same time, he is also especially lucky above Homelander to have someone that sees the best in him and is actively pushing and hoping for the best in his growth, Uncle Huey. What makes The Boys an interesting contrast to Avatar is that where Avatar spares us the blood, The Boys zooms in on it and rarely turns down the opportunity to depict some of the most gruesome, sadistic, or downright disturbing realities as viscerally as possible, which goes a long way in separating Azula, whose acts of violence are mostly implied, and Homelander, someone we get to see not just commit the murder in painstaking visual detail, but also revel in it in a way that feels deeply invasive to witness, almost like we're watching it while hiding in a closet in that same room. When Homelander is torturing the scientists at the lab he grew up in, he's not doing it to seek out some solution to his core problem. He's doing it because he simply wants the high of seeing others feel the pain he feels. When we consider a character forgivable, it's partly because their cruelty is the byproduct of them seeking solutions. What makes someone like Homelander unforgivable is that his cruelty isn't a byproduct, it's the point. I suspect that while this added layer of disturbance casts Homelander far from being redeemable, when it comes to Zuko, who does qualify for redemption, his parallel Butcher might actually be past the acceptance barrier for redemption in the audience's eyes as well, since a similar grotesqueness is definitely present in his loving protection as well. That's what's interesting here. It almost seems like we as witnesses don't just need a redemption to feel earned. We need the guilty acts to be minimized, either through our own ignorance, by say, off-screening victims, or by making light of their wrongdoings. It almost seems to be the writer's way of saying, yeah, this is bad, but like, not so bad it ruins your vibe and makes you hate them. We do want you to like this character eventually, after all. It does make me think differently about Zuko's redemption arc being considered one of the greatest redemption arcs. Now, that is not to say that it isn't the case. I'll gladly glaze Avatar about 613 times as much as the next fan. But I do think that this new era of media, where we like to see uncensored, gratuitous, visceral acts of violence and the resulting trauma, is going to have a big impact on how redemption arcs are done. Since Zuko has the luxury of his heinous acts being mostly censored or minimized in some way, it'll be interesting to see just how much harder writers have to work to make redemptions for characters like Butcher or Omni-Man feel earned by the broader fan bases. Now, since we've taken a look at actions and how their severity, depictions, or consequences place these characters at different points in the spectrum of the forgiveness threshold, let's factor in the motivations at hand, and how our understanding of Zuko's psychology affects our ability to grant him forgiveness compared to Homelander. In Zuko's case, we know his acts result from his inner turmoil with his mom abandoning him and his only parent treating him like trash, only valuing him for capturing the Avatar. In this way, it's easy for the audience to transition from viewing him as a villain to understanding that the harm he does is a result of a desperate attempt to feel honorable or valued by his family and home country. There's so much concrete understanding of his character motivations, mainly because we have all that information to understand to begin with. Zuko's story is almost completely told through his perspective as a protagonist after all. Now, what's interesting is that Homelander, who could be considered the farthest from forgiveness out of all the characters we mentioned, receives a lot of focus and perspective in The Boys as well. We as the audience understand his psychology just as keenly as Zuko's. Initially coming into this exploration, I thought perspective would be a main divider of these characters into being forgivable and unforgivable, but it's not as much perspective as it is the motivations and fulfillment. Homelander is raised from birth to be a tool of Vought, a hollow symbol of strength and heroic values. He's actually intentionally raised to have an emptiness and fear of abandonment to allow Vought executives to psychologically manipulate him. He's raised in a lab and never receives the privilege of having someone to connect with him to see the best in him. His experiences, his upbringing and power, coupled with his mental problems, make him so alien that he could barely connect with others if he genuinely tried. These factors make him so unrelatable to the audience that his resulting compulsions and motivations, especially when depicted in an R-rated show, make us feel the distance between him and rehabilitation. He's genuinely so lost that it would be tough to imagine what that arc would look like written well if even attempted. With Zuko, we don't watch him revel in the consequences of his actions in a pleasure-seeking way. He's doing what he does out of a sense of duty and purpose he's been given by his dad. We know he really just wants to have his family, home, and sense of belonging back. In Homelander's case, we don't see the same sort of vulnerability with him. While we buy into the fact that Zuko has a veil over his eyes, not realizing that there isn't anything truly fulfilling waiting for him at home, we aren't as charitable to Homelander in the same way, even if he's just as lost. So what makes a character truly unforgivable? It's not just the evil they do, but how much we're asked to confront it. Redemption arcs live or die by how human a character still feels. When a character's violence is off-screen or softened, we're more open to their growth. When it's graphic and personal, it's harder to look past. Zuko gets a chance because his pain feels relatable, his actions understandable. Homelander doesn't, because his damage makes him alien. Azula fails to open up, so she breaks. Butcher might be too far gone, or maybe not, if we're willing to look past what we've seen. Ultimately, forgiveness in fiction, like in life, isn't just about wrongdoing. It's about whether we still believe there's someone worth saving underneath it all, and how much our own exposure to that harm affects that belief. But what do I know? I'm just a voice on the internet.